Okay, so welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Fortra. Topic today is the biggest trends in the 2023 State of IBM Security Study. So it's a study that Fortra's been doing for many years, and we really wanted to share with you some of the results from this study. My name's Sandi Moore. I'll be your host today, and I've actually been working on IBMI for about 20 years now. And right now, my capacity is a lead solutions engineer, and my primary focus is on security software and helping customers to identify the solutions best to fit their current security project needs. And I've worked in many different roles, including support and testing and training, and now on this pre-sales solutions engineer side of it. With me today, I have my colleague, Amy Williams. Amy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So like Sandi, I've been working with the platform for just over 20 years now. And before the conversation started, I realized that I actually stood up my very first shop in 2002. So been everything from doing the hardware to software implementations. Now my focus is really on the security side of the house and providing services to our customers to harden their systems and get into a better place.
Awesome. So I know you're going to have some really good insight for us today, so I appreciate you joining me. It's always better to have two voices. All right, so we are the study sponsor. So the State of IBM Security Study provided by Fortra, we actually provide the premier security products for IBMI as well as other multi-platform brands. And you may have heard of some of those. We've got Alert Logic, Tripwire, to name just a few, but really about the security across the entire security infrastructure in being able to provide you tools to meet every single need, regardless of what platform you're on. We provide comprehensive security services to really help assess and mitigate those issues that based on your OS features, and that's really where Amy shines. And of course, we're a member of PCI Security Standards Council, staying on top of the requirements so we understand what the requirements are in order to meet those needs. And of course, publisher of the State of IBM Security Study since 2004. So 19 years, and that's going to come back, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But first, I really want to talk about the security study itself and what it's all about, and really what the primary objectives are from this study. And really, Fortra is all about education and helping the community to understand what the exposures are so that they know what they need to do to address those. The better the platform is performing and the better that we understand it, the more pervasive it's going to be and the more stable it's going to be, and the environments are going to be that much better. Really trying to give a focus in the top areas of concern so that you are prioritizing those mitigation activities. Don't spend time on things that are not important. So really focus on where you should be focusing the security initiatives. And of course, it helps to support the IT efforts to get these security projects going. And sometimes it's an uphill battle, especially with IBMI. It's seen as this secure platform. And so everybody's like, oh, it's just the green screen. It's fine. We don't need to spend any money on it. So really, we're trying to help to give you the tools to go to management, go to upper levels and say, we really need to work on this. And so this can help you to get that traction in those projects. The data itself is collected through our Fortra Security Scan for IBMI. And this is a utility that runs, it's a Windows application that runs very quickly from a PC out to your IBMI. And what it does is it does an inside out configuration evaluation. So what it's doing is going from inside the IBMI, collecting information across 7 key configuration categories and producing a report for you, as opposed to an outside in security scan, which may be only looking at port scans and ways that can be connected to the system, but doesn't actually look at the configurations themselves. And the scan itself, though, is not really intended to be a granular review. that would be used for audits and regulatory compliance mandates. This is that high level view. Think of it as your 30,000 foot view. So with these security scans, we collect all this information and build this report. The benefit for customers is that this is a tangible assessment. So this is something that you can have that will in fact show exactly where you're at on the system and give you that starting point. And we also provide as a benefit is that you get some time with us and to help you interpret the results and explain the findings. Why did you scan for this? Why do you show it as high risk? What do you mean this is bad? And so it gives you that extra information. When the data is collected, it's pretty cool. Security scan is free. So the software itself is no charge. You also get that free hour of review time, and there's no obligation. So if you run that scan, you don't have to buy anything from us. You can walk away and say, all right, I know things are really bad, but not my problem. But you can even you can opt out of sharing that anonymous data. So really, this is the easy way to get all this extra information and be able to get that evaluation of the security settings on your system. You might be thinking that this is a scam. Maybe you're skeptical that why would a software company that sells software give away such a valuable tool? So for full transparency, we like to share why we do this. The security scan itself and the study has been published since 2004. So this has been around for a very long time. We've reached and assessed thousands of servers and worked with hundreds of customers with the scan and interpreting those results and helping to do remediation after that. And of course, the benefits for you is the no cost, right? So you get to have time with a security expert and understand what the problems are on your system so you know what you want to address. Our benefit is that we get to demonstrate our expertise. So we're able to show you that we understand the system, we understand the pain points, and we can also take information from your results to bring back to our developers to even enhance our tools even more so that we're able to ensure that we're staying on top of what the current threats are. And of course, this data is voluntary, and participating in the study, you get to choose if you are going to submit your results to us and to be used in the study that we're going to talk about, as well as it's anonymous. So we don't know who you are. There is no tie to it. I can't say that my pal JD here, his system was terrible. I don't know whose system it was. So there is no way for us to know that information. So there is no compromise that way. And of course, we're the first company that actually had the foresight to see that this would be a valuable tool. And so really coming to the table first and being able to provide you with this information, I think is pretty important. Of course, we offer the scan to anyone and everyone worldwide. So we have no idea who or where people are running the scan, but we may receive those anonymous results. So this is a global survey. We don't have any control over which systems it's run against. So whether it's a production system, test, development, we don't know. So really this data is pulling from potentially anywhere, any type of system. So the results can be sometimes a little wonky because we are looking at a bunch of development systems that nobody's paid any attention to, but the production system might be great. So really this is truly this anonymous submission of data from global systems. And of course, we are dismissing multiple scans. So the study data, we'll go through it and look for multiple scans that are from a same system. And so we are going to throw out those multiple results. Because what I've seen happen is someone runs a scan that looks terrible. They go back, they tweak a couple things, they run the scan again, and then they run it again, and then again, until they get the results that they want. So we don't want all of that. We just want the one that was done last, because we'll give you the benefit of the doubt that you fix things. So. All right. I think, Amy, do you think that explains pretty well why we're doing this and where this comes from?
Yeah, I think letting everybody know that they're not alone in this, journey
Yeah.
to be secure. And it's one of the things that I learned early on. There is no, end. You don't get to say finished and done,
Yeah.
but you get to say better and hopefully better every day. And this really shows you that you're not alone in this adventure.
Yeah.
We
No,
can
I
call
think
it that.
that's a good
Um,
point. Absolutely. So, what actually what that actually brings to mind here is why we're still having to do this 19 years later, and what's been the main inhibitor to better IBMI security, and the fact that we're still having these conversations after this many years. And I think inaction is probably one of the biggest inhibitors, is that there is not anything being done once these security exposures have been discovered. There's a lot of different reasons for that. And I think, Amy, I think you have a pretty good pulse on where customers are coming from, working with them so much. Give us a little bit of ideas on really where maybe this lack of action is coming from.
So it's certainly, I think some is the misperception, right? Your IBMI is the securest system there is. Well, it's secureable, and I think we've been getting to a place now where it's starting to gain more attention. Um, it was a lack of knowledge, right? You look at your other teams for your other platforms, and they are teams and teams of people. And when you look at your IBMI and that generally smaller team that is doing everything, right? They're doing the support, they're doing the security, they're managing the systems, the performance, the hardware. Security becomes that 12th item on a 10-item list. And we'll get to it later when we can, because performance comes to the top of the list. There's not a CVE published every day on the IBMI platform, but they are becoming more frequent. And IBM is raising the awareness, even in the IBM community, for the vulnerabilities that are within the system that can be resolved with patches. And it comes to, that patch management. The IBM is less and less a green screen platform. Fewer and fewer customers' applications are green screen only. There might be a component, but most of these are now web enabled. And whether that's running on the IBMI or it's integrated with another platform, which is very different from the way I started out managing my systems right in 2001. It was all green screen all the time. Um, so the environment has changed, which I'm hoping is bringing a new attention. But I think it also contributed to the lack of attention before, is because we thought it was old and we thought that it was safe and nobody really knew about it. And they'll never figure out, that backdoor that they can use to elevate privileges. Nobody
Mm.
knows about that. And now there's a few information capable systems out there that grant us the ability to figure these things out a lot quicker.
Yeah, for sure. I hear a lot too, the reliance on a firewall. I can't tell you how many times the first thing that comes out of anybody's mouth when we're in a security scan review is, well, the system's behind the firewall, so we're not worried about it. And there's a lot of that. So, I'd also like to know really what our customers are coming up against as to why they can't get traction on security. So you're welcome in the questions panel there if you'd like to throw out there um, any obstacles that you've run up against as well. That we'd love to hear it, because we really want to understand where this lack of action is coming from. All right, so let's actually throw out a poll here. I like to use polls just to kind of get a feel for what everybody's doing. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this one. Kind of curious what kind of security projects you're currently working on. And so kind of gives us an idea of what people's concerns are. If you are working on malware or ransomware protection, I know that's a hot topic. Securing your TCP IP interfaces, so another area of concern. Kind of Amy alluded to that with talking about green screen versus all of the other interfaces. and how green screen is not quite as big as it used to be, although it's my
Mhm.
preference. SIM and syslog solution. All right, so getting all of that information together and gathered up into a single SIM, and when you're just maybe a tiny part of the ecosystem, and maybe your system, and they're asking for your information to be pulled up, that's possible. Other projects, and then maybe you're not sure, and sometimes we're not included in those conversations, so who knows. All right, I'm going to give you another second here to respond to that poll, and then we'll go ahead and close that. All right, so I'm actually going to, I was going to launch that. All right, so it looked like the majority of you, 35% are looking at malware and ransomware protection, 26% looking at securing TCP/IP interfaces, 4% looking at SIM, 17% other, 17% not sure. So looks like there's some variety in there, and some of you may have answered multiples. It's certainly going to be on the agenda. All right, so let's go back to our topic at hand and talk about what is happening and how we're going to be able to make a difference. So the study that we're talking about is, we've got our new edition available and on our website, so you can go request that and download the copy of it. We're not going to be able to cover all the information today because it is a ton of information. So what we've done is we've actually pulled out a few of the metrics from the study that we thought were really important, that are really the key, the beginning of your, should be the beginning of your security journey anyways. So, all right. So Amy, why don't you talk to us about the Q security system value, the first metric we're looking at here.
Oh, this is one of my favorites. IBM has been shipping the systems at level 40 since 5.1, 5.2. And I know that we are still working with a number of customers that are still at level 20 or level 30. I have yet to see a level 10. I would hoping there's none out there, but it sounded like they were a lot of fun back in the day because you could just key in a user profile and it would grant you administrative privileges and access to the system with that user profile you keyed in.
Wow.
Yeah, right? But there still are a number of systems running at 20 and 30. And the big obstacles with those is that they allow programs to run without integrity checking that was brought in by level 40. So moving between those can certainly be a challenge. But the great thing that IBM has brought to the table is that we can configure those 20 and 30 systems to run as if they were at level 40 before you make that big commitment and IPL into that. Highlights is at 20, as soon as you create a user profile, by default, it's granted all object and save sys. So it's an administrator of the system. It can restore objects to the system it doesn't have authority to, and it can save any object on the system. And then at 30, there's some opportunities for users to be able to elevate that aren't well known without explicit permissions to other user profiles. So that's the big one that gets kind of capped off when you move into 40. And the other one is the integrity checking and not being able to access system domain programs directly, and that you have to go through the approved IBM APIs to do that. So it really is, it's more doable than you think. And again, the part that I really like is that you can get that configuration done and ready and ensure that everything's in place before you make that commitment in IPL and turn the system on, and then your application's not running anymore. With the addition of 20 to the table, when you move that, and you can move from 20 to 40 or 20 to 30 and then step up to 40. When you do that IPL, the user profiles are actually changed. It revokes those authorities from the user profiles that shouldn't have it. And again, this is all things that you can do preventatively. 30 to 40, this is that system domain programs, if they're being called without using an approved API, at 30, it's a nice little message, and it'll tell you that you're doing bad things, but at 40, it will cause a halt. So again, applications can, come to a standstill when you do that IPL and you're now running at 40, if you don't do those preventative things. And then when you're going 220 to 40, you've got to take both of those things into account. So it's a little bit more work to do, that skip step IPL. But again, there's detail in the OS security reference guide, which I highly recommend people becoming more familiar with. We know that I live with it open on my desktop on a daily basis. But it's got a lot of good information in there. And Sandi said it at the beginning of this webinar, we are about education, and we want our customers to be able to, and the IBM community really as a whole, to be able to be as independent as they want to be and as independent as they can be. So we're here to help, but we're also, want you to be able to get a lot of that information yourselves. Did I miss anything on those, Sandi?
No, actually, I think it should be frightening people. They need to make sure that they check their security level, because there's definitely some concerns around that. And the fact that 30% of the systems that we evaluated with this study were at security level 20 or 30, and the fact that they're still there is a big issue. And I hope that this doing a security scan with us and actually evaluating your system and talking about what this means for you and what the impact can be, and hoping that it will get somebody to take action on this. I think it's a big concern. So of course this is tied to our users and security level 20 and all those lovely user profiles. One of the other metrics that we picked out were around passwords. User profiles are, and your password is how you get on the system unless you're at security level 10. So beyond that, really, these users have to have these credentials. And maybe Amy, we can talk to what we're seeing with passwords.
Yeah, and this one always surprises me every year, that it continues to be such a high number of default passwords. And if you don't know, if you're new to the IBM I platform and you're attending this webinar, a default password in the IBM I world means your password is the same as your user profile. Now again, IBM ships the systems very functional, but it also means that they're very open. So the default today at 7.4 and prior is that when you create a user profile, the default is to create it with that default password. And when that happens, it makes it really easy to enumerate those profiles and be able to guess that password and be able to take systems over. The only profile that IBM ships that has to have a password is the QSEC offer profile. So that's like root in other systems. With that, you would be very surprised at how many IBM profiles end up with passwords. People have, misunderstandings of how some of those profiles are intended to be used or should be used. In your shop, all of those Q profiles, those IBM supplied profiles, should really be set to a password of none. It still allows them to run jobs. They can still do all the work they need to do internally, but it prevents them from being able to be used for an external connection. So something to really keep in mind, because believe it or not, it happens where those IBM profiles have default passwords. So it's the same as their profile. These profiles are well known and well published out there. So we see it often that they're being used in password spray attacks against IBMIs, that they're using those common profiles with the default passwords. Don't get caught in that. So if we look at the different password levels, the metrics are that 30% of the systems out there are at 2 and 3, or above. 70% of the systems are still running with passwords that are not case sensitive and are a limit of 10 characters with only 4 special characters allowed to be used. When you move to levels 2 and 3, you are now enabling those passphrases, right? So you can type in a sentence for your password. You can use that 14 minimum character that's now being recommended by some of the other guidelines that are out there for security. And now in 7.5, not only has IBM changed their default for creating those user profiles, so the password is now a *none by default at creation time, they've also introduced a new password level 4 that eliminates the weaker hashed passwords and brings in a SHA-512 encryption level to the passwords that are being used. Doesn't change the complexities, doesn't change the ability to use passphrases or what rules you can put in place. It does increase the encryption level from what the previous versions allowed for.
Yeah.
So what did we really, oh, sorry, Sandy.
No, go ahead.
So the real risks, right? And I talked about it a little bit with password spray attack, but very often, if you don't have additional protections in front of your system, which a lot of us, I didn't back in the day, and I know a lot of the people we interact with now don't, that password is the only thing stopping somebody from getting to your entire database, from being able to either exfiltrate and take all of your data with them. We might not be able to prevent people from changing data that they shouldn't be able to change just because they have access, just because they got a hold of that password. Often, and I will, own up to it, back in the day, I was one of those administrators where I didn't want to deal with the complex password rules that we were supposed to have in place, and I'd override those rules. We can now prevent those things from happening. IBM introduced the password rules that can enforce administrators to have to play by the rules, which I think is phenomenal. Expiring passwords, great. You've expired the password, it's still at a default. Well, whoever signs in first now owns that profile, because all the expire password does is it's going to force you to change that password. Well, guess who's changing it? The first person that used it. So even when we have strong passwords in place, using them over and over again, and I know this is one of those best practice things that people talk about on all of the platforms, don't reuse passwords, because once that password gets compromised, it's going to be used across the board for people to try and break the different platforms with the different common user profiles and using those passwords. And if we think about when we're logging into a system, when we're authenticating, what does the password really prove? The password knows that you've got the user profile and you've got that password, but it doesn't necessarily prove who they are when they're entering in that information for the authentication.
Seems to me there needs to be some changes here.
And there's some really easy ones, which is great. And again, I alluded to it. At 7.2, IBM introduced 2 new values for password rules, and that's the limit profile name and the all create change. Limit profile name means the profile itself cannot exist anywhere within the password either. So if you've gone to a minimum of 12 on your password length, if your user profile is 10 characters, they can't key in that 10 character profile and put a special character and a number at the end of it and have that be a valid password. That limit profile name means not only does it prevent default passwords, but it prevents them from putting in common enumerations of those passwords that get used. To find out who might be at risk for this, there is a built-in report in the IBMI, Analyze Default Password Report. It's on the Sec Tools menu. You can run that and it will list every profile on your system that has a default password. The other pieces that we can do is when we find them, expire their passwords. Set the password to none and force them to call into your help desk to do that password change, or do a self-help password change. Anything to get that password out of circulation is going to reduce that risk that you have on your system for user profiles from being compromised. When you're creating new user profiles, look at that process. Are you using default passwords when you're creating those profiles? Can you use a different standard password when you're doing resets or when you're doing new profile creations? So these are just some of the steps that I wanted to mention today when Sandi and I got to talking about this subject, that can really reduce your risk and improve your posture across the board.
Absolutely. You know, I did a lot of the reviews of the security scans from this study, and I actually ran into a couple of systems where the minimum length of these passwords was 1 character. And I was horrified, and they had thousands of users, and they didn't realize that it was set that way, and they thought they had better, stronger password settings. And you know, it brought to light really what exactly was happening on their system. Something everybody assumed they were better than it was better than it was. So you know, this is important. It's just that they're inside the network, they're at the door, they have the credentials. You need to make sure that that key is a strong key that is going to get them in the door to the system. Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Appreciate that. Passwords are the bane of my existence. All right. So our next metric, we're looking at the security study, is the admin privileges. So, you know, when we look at this, unfortunately, year over year, the data hasn't changed much, and we haven't seen a whole lot of movement in this. And I don't know really where this struggle is and why we're seeing it, but it continues to be a concern. So really, with these admin privileges, these are those 8 special authorities that IBM allows you to assign to your users, either directly or through a group profile. And with these admin privileges, these users can have pretty significant access to make changes on the system. And you know, there's concerns with this. You know, when we look at these profiles, they are often assigned a user class, which should give them a basic template of the special authorities they should receive, but those can be overridden. You know, the other day I changed myself to a star user, but I gave myself all the special authorities. And so it doesn't matter what the user class is. So relying on that as your baseline is definitely a concern. And in most cases, users don't need these authorities. And if they do need the authorities, it's on a temporary basis. Think about your help desk people. They may need SecAdmin in order to re-enable or fix a profile or solve a problem, but they don't need to do that all the time. It's a one-off. It's those things that need to be happening from time to time. What else do you see with admin privileges, Amy? Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of confusion, and it still happens today with user class, where people will go through, nope, I've got all users on my system.
Yeah.
And you do, but that user class is only really used for a shortcut to set the special authorities, either at the time you change the profile or at creation time. Because it will, if you set them at SecAdmin, you'll get the SecAdmin privileges. If you set them at SecOffer, it grants all 8 privileges at the time of creation. That user class beyond that really doesn't touch anything. And we consistently see configurations where they're like, oh, we've only given them all objects, so they can't do anything else. And you and I had some fun a couple weeks ago where we challenged someone, and that's all they gave us. They gave us all object on our profile, and within about 2 minutes, I had all admin privileges on their system.
Yeah.
So all object is the key to everything. Do each of the authorities play a special role? Absolutely. And to do everything, you do need all of them, but all object is a quick way to get there. Job controls the other one, and job control, spool control, they're always in competition. I'm always curious which one's going to win each year. If there's a misconception on when they're needed. So spool control gives you access to everybody's printed output. You don't need it for your own. Your users don't need it for them to be able to view their own. Same with job control. Job control should be limited to your operations staff and people that need to be ending other users' jobs. They don't need it to control their own job. They own that job as soon as they submit it and it's theirs. So those are some other misconceptions and why I think we continue to see the numbers so high on those. And people think they're not that important. But with job control, you can end the system. You
Yep.
can end all the subsystems, you can end all the interfaces. And that wasn't a fun recovery day in my shop that day. So
And I've had customers share stories with me. I had a gentleman who had a user who submitted a job on the wrong day. He panicked and he went to go in the job and instead edited the subsystem because he
mhm,
could. And
yep.
he put them, basically their production was down and they thought there was a problem and they're scrambling to figure it out and it was just a user mistake. But we see that with spool control. Another user that had, they had a user who went to go clean up their spooled files, didn't
Mhm,
know what they were looking at. They deleted the out queue. Oops,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
So yeah, all object, you can delete the operating system. So, I mean, they're a big deal. And so there's a lot of things that I think that people should be considering doing and the actions that should be taken to remediate some of this. I don't know, Amy, if you want to talk about a little bit about, really what we would recommend when we're talking about these special authorities and all these users.
Yeah, so with all object obviously is a huge focus. If you can put into place where you've got a day-to-day profile for your administrators and for your um, operational staff, and then they have an elevated profile that they've got to check out. This is becoming a more and more standard practice across the IT world, where we have our daily profile and we do all of our, upfront work with those, and then we've got our elevated profile that we check out when we've got to make major changes to the systems. I think that's one of the best things to look at when you're trying to pull these back, but you aren't sure what they need. Keep that ability for them to have that, but don't make it their everyday profile. And then using the built-in report again, IBM provides us this information. You can print off from that Sec Tools menu your user privileges, and it will show you the user and all their groups and the privileges that they have. Because don't forget, it's not just what that user profile looks like and what special authorities are there. It's also all the special authorities from all possible 15 groups they could be a member of. IBM kindly combines all of them, and you get access to everything that you're a member of. So don't forget about the groups is something that I'd also say. In command line's only needed for users that actually need to run commands, and only if they're accessing from the green screen. So I touched on it before, where a lot of systems, it's not green screen anymore. You're coming in through a web UI or some other graphical interface. You don't need command line. Get that limited capability set to yes. And if they do have command line, if they need it, turn auditing on so you can see what commands they're running, which can be a huge help and tool, not only if there's the bad, right, in an incident, but if you're just trying to figure out what happened and how to prevent it from happening again. Um, those are my biggest tips that we look at when we're looking at special authorities and user configurations.
Only thing I would add to that is that when you're onboarding, if you're going to copy a user profile, press F9 and page down to see if they have any special authorities before you do it, because I see that a lot where it's
Mhm.
just merely oh, this looks good. This guy's in the same department, but he was unfortunately configured incorrectly and had too many authorities, and you propagate that further. So
Yeah, and using actual specific template profiles for that role typed access versus going, hey, John's new, so can you just, copy Susie, and then he'll just have everything Susie has. Well, Susie's been here for 20 years, so Lord only
Yep.
knows what Susie's got.
Yep.
When John really just needs to be a receiver in the warehouse. So thinking about creating template profiles or something else. And then again with your admins, I don't want to forget, and we touched on it with passwords, but to really know who that admin is, introducing not only logging and tracking of what commands they're running, but introducing multi-factor authentication and ensuring that not only do they have that password, but they really are who they say they are when they're entering that password.
Yep. Good idea. All right. Next metric. What are we looking at? Exit programs, one of my favorite topics. Yay. All right. So when we're looking at exit programs from last year's security study, we actually saw an increase in companies that had some exit programs, but we saw a decrease in the number of complete coverage for the exit programs. And I think sometimes it's a matter of not knowing really what they are. And so an exit program is a programmer defined function that is going to disrupt the connection to the system when you come in through one of those side doors to the system. Think of your IBMI as a building. Green screens, your front door, all those side doors, those are those exit points, those TCP/IP connections to your system. So those exit programs can actually interrupt that connection and determine something, whether it depends on what the program's set to do. And what we really want to see is that these exit programs provide auditing and access control. So you actually can see who's coming in through those side doors and what they're doing when they come in through those side doors. The system in itself does not provide that information for you. And so it's unfortunate that we do still see that there's not a lot of adoption of this technology. And it really should be one of the first deployed improvements to security on the system to give you that visibility to who's connecting to the system and how they're connecting. When we look at those exit programs on the customer systems that we do see them, I've had people tell me, well, I don't know what that exit program is. I don't know who wrote it. Or the guy who used to work here 20 years ago wrote the program. We don't know what it does. It's because exit programs can do anything that they're set to do, whether they're malicious intent or if it is in fact a security measure that's actually limiting access. Those exit points really are the entry points to the system, and there's dozens of them, and they are embedded in the operating system. You can't remove them. You can control if the jobs that service those are enabled. But a lot of these systems, as we've pointed out already, is that it's not all about green screen anymore. You need these connection points to allow for those web interfaces and those application interfaces to be able to connect to the system to get to the data. So you can't just shut those down. So that's where those exit programs provide that control at those entry points where you can actually add that layer of security and see if this person should be allowed in. If they're allowed in, what can they do? We're going to let Amy into the system through ODBC because she's in finance and she needs to pull a report. But does Amy really need to be able to run a command through ODBC? Probably not. And I wouldn't trust her if she did. So
Now.
sorry. But those are the things where you don't think about that. You give users access to do certain things on the system, but really you intended them to use this interface for it. But without having an exit program in place, you can't really enforce that. You hope that they can't figure out another way to get around to the system. But the fact that those are open and available, and you've got users with access to Google where they can, or one of those other search engines where they can find commands and how to do things against the system, it lends it to be exposed. And these are the more commonly attacked interfaces. If you've got a threat actor, they're not going to attack the green screen. They're going to attack through web interface. They're going to attack through the file server. They're going to attack through FTP. So these interfaces are unfortunately the least guarded, but yet the most vulnerable to attacks. So the plan of action there is to determine first if you have exit programs and then figure out who wrote those. Because of course, as I mentioned, Exit programs can do anything. And so you really want to know what they are. If you are audited, I don't think auditors are really fond of your own people writing your exit programs for the security, and really looking at a commercial solution written independently of your employees is usually a better approach to that. So making sure that you understand truly what's there on your system. Now, those exit program based solutions, we have one of those that is available that covers all of those exit points, gives you that visibility and control over who is allowed to use which side door to the system. Think of it as your firewall for the IBMI. Your system's inside your firewall. We already talked about firewalls. It's inside the firewall, but let's make a firewall around the system itself. You have all these users in your environment who are inside the firewall that are going to get to the core server. And so really being able to deploy that exit program based solution and be able to really get the system to that deny by default, which is really not the standard for IBMI. And we want to make sure that you are able to say, you know what, you can't get in unless we've explicitly given you that access. Once you've deployed those exit programs, you need to make sure that you're maintaining them. So security is not set it and forget it in most cases. It is evolving. You need to make new considerations. New employees are added, new applications are added, new interfaces are added. So making sure that your exit program solution is in fact keeping up with that. All right, Amy, anything to add to that? I know I get excited and start talking.
You do. It's one of your favorites. No, I think the maintenance is an important thought, right? You guys can certainly roll your own, but maintaining those programs, having that bandwidth to do that, and keeping up with the OS changes, it's something to take into consideration when you're looking at different solutions out there, including ours, is the fact that we take care of that for you.
Yep, 100%. All right. Oh, I think we've scared people a lot. So, but you know what? I like the story. So let me tell you a story about exit programs. So we had a customer who was evaluating our exit program solution, and about 2 weeks into it, they reached out and said, hey, we're looking at all this activity from last night. We're a little concerned. And what they saw was through FTP, they had almost 800 attempts, intrusion attempts through FTP overnight. And they were from a foreign IP address. The system was behind the firewall. They didn't think it was visible, outward facing, but yet this foreign IP address. And the profiles that were being used were all Unix-based profiles, root, admin, administrator. And someone was really trying hard. They weren't going to get in with those profiles, but the fact that they were at the door trying to get into the system, and prior to 2 weeks before, they wouldn't even have been watching that. And so the fact that someone's trying is just as big of a problem, if not a bigger problem, then they got in. You know, these are attempts to get into the server that you need to know about.
Yeah, and I mean that really leads us into our next metric that we have.
Yeah.
And that's the auditing, right?
For sure.
19% of the systems don't even have auditing turned on that were surveyed, or that participated in the study, sorry. 81% are, which is fantastic, but then the question is, you've got it turned on, are you looking at it? So there is a overwhelming amount of information that you can get to from the audit journal that's all built into IBMI. So knowing what to audit and how to audit that, and then how to look at it, again, isn't turned on by default. You've got to turn it on, but all of the infrastructure for it is there. So if we look at what the risks are for not having that turned on, and what you really need to take into consideration, it's not going to hit your performance, right? Disk is the one concern, and that all matters on how much data you can keep and how much you're collecting. I am an advocate of turning things on like this on Mondays and watching them. This is not a 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, turn it on and hope you don't get the call over the weekend. And then when you have that turned on, look at it. Look at that data. There are a number of queries that IBM has now provided in Access Client Solutions in that example set that you can interrogate it with. You can also use different tools to be able to alert on bad actors, on, you know, invalid sign-on attempts by QSEC offer, right? We just had 20 of those in the last 5 minutes. Somebody should be getting an alert on activity like that. Looking at those types of processes, integrating your IBMI into your other logging and SIM tool is certainly the better way of bringing it to the forefront. It shouldn't just be the IBMI team that's worrying about the IBMI. If you have a security team, they should be worrying about your IBMI also. So what you really need to do next is figure out if you've got it turned on. Make sure you're not just deleting the receiver as soon as it changes, because all that data is gone as soon as you do that. Look at what the best practices are to see what you should be auditing. Authority failures, the security events. That's going to give you your invalid sign-on attempts. The things that Sandi was talking about when that FTP server was getting hammered, all those events are going to be in that audit log. And then if you don't have auditing turned on, or even if you do, develop a plan to manage it. We suggest not storing it in QGPL, which if anyone has worked with me before, I call that kind of the junk drawer of the IBMI, right? We throw everything in QGPL. Don't put your audit journal data there. It's more important than that. Let it have its own library. And then evaluate a method to either alert on activities in there, report on activities out there. And there's a lot of nice third-party tools when you're ready to do that, but you can also access it on your own through the built-in IBM views that they've introduced in 7.3 and 7.4.
Awesome. So get auditing. If you're not already, get on it. All right. So
it's all about the data set.
I know, right? Got to have that data. All right. Last metric we highlight today is virus protection. So looking at systems, we evaluated only 13% of the systems that we evaluated actually had virus protection enabled for scanning files on open. And so, you know, IBM has actually included this support for virus scanning natively on the system over the IFS since V5R3. And so they felt it was important. So what we're not seeing though is that the adoption for that. The IFS is absolutely a perfectly willing candidate for infection, hosting malware, as well as being attacked by ransomware. And it's not a matter of if it's going to happen. If you have read-write shares, it's when it's going to happen. So really enabling this virus protection is a critical function. These systems can be impacted by this. We've seen customer systems where they have 500,000 files encrypted by ransomware, and that the fact that the root gets shared, that you have an all object profile, and someone's protection fails on their workstation opens up the system to be vulnerable to that. We have a ton of real world examples, and I could talk about this for an hour, and sometimes I do. So go look at one of our other webinars we have hosted on our website, some on-demand webinars where we talk about this in detail. But it is absolutely essential. It's not if, it's when the systems are going to be attacked. So it, you know, still gets some surprise from people. They think, no, not really. It's real. Really, the couple things that you should be doing and some considerations to take are to never share your root folder. If you've shared root, you have some exposures there. You're exposing potentially qsys.lib from that root directory. So extra steps to take there. Make sure that you're securing the QPWF server authorization list. It won't protect against your all object users, but at least your average user isn't going to be able to delete the operating system. Make sure that you have those IFS shares are not discoverable, and use a native virus scan engine. So tie into the operating system controls, and then consider using exit programs to control the IFS access through the file server, and then also evaluate what the user's doing. So if through the IFS, through the file server, if they are doing a programmatic read, rename, encrypt, and delete of the files, that might be a ransomware attack. You want to be able to stop that. So
Yeah.
using tools that are available, I think, is going to be go a long way for protecting the system from this clear and present threat. So, all
And I know
right.
in the poll, a lot of people mentioned that they were looking at going down that
Yeah.
protection. So not only is this metric, but when you look at the full security study, there's a
Mhm.
lot more information that we've provided. So certainly what
Yeah.
we've touched on today, there's deeper dives into those subjects than what we've been able to touch on today, as well as a lot more that we weren't able to have time for.
Absolutely. And it's not about tackling all of this all at the same time. You're not expected to be getting this all fixed right away. The systems have been sitting out there for many years. Some of these systems have been around for 30 years. You upgrade, you take along the old baggage. So really taking it one bite at a time and making sure that you are tackling the biggest pieces first, that low-hanging fruit, and then really get digging into the rest of it. All right. I'm going to throw a poll out here. I know we're getting short on time, but a couple things I want to kind of throw out there is wondering if, in fact, your company conducts regular security assessments, whether it's against your IBMI or if it's on your other servers and then the IBMI has been overlooked. And if it's really done on a regular basis or when somebody thinks of it. So, it's certainly something to consider in making sure that you are aware of what's going on your server and making sure that you have addressed that. All right, so it looks like a lot of you do yearly or less often. So, this is really something that we do encourage customers to do. Take a look at that security on the server. There's even baselines that are available. The CIS benchmarks for IBMI. They've been available for a couple of OS versions, and
Mhm.
use this as a baseline. This is a standard that can be used to determine where you're at on your server security. And really, you just don't want to be the last one to figure it out. So these benchmarks are available for anybody. So if somebody has to determine that you have an IBMI and they want to see what kind of security measures should be in place to test against for inappropriate access, you certainly don't want to find that out the hard way. All right, a couple of takeaways for you guys. Really, I think we've really covered a lot of ground and a lot of concerns on the system, but I think that, some things to think about is that the threat of a security incident, it's not going to stop. It's only going to increase. And the more attention these servers get and the more threats that are out there, the more that you're going to be up against. So, I think that IBM Power, IBMI really do have a good foundation, but that security measures are not inherent, and you have to actually activate them and actually take those steps to be able to get to that point.
Mhm.
And we talked about little steps. So little things can make a difference. And, sometimes it's that low hanging fruit that can close up what was one of your most vulnerable exposures.
Yeah. So get visibility, and that's really what we're talking about when we talk about auditing and inventorying your system. Is get visibility to what's going on, and there's an easy way for you to really do that. So I think we've touched on everything today, Sandy. So
Yep, absolutely. So only thing I want to encourage you is to look at the security scan. If you want to reach out to us, we're happy to assist you with that. If you wanted to participate in the study or not and submitting your anonymous data, but we really do think that starting with an assessment of where you're at, getting that high level overview is a great place to start, and it'll at least get that conversation going, and you've got something to take to your management and take to the people who are making the decisions to actually get you to that point. All right, I know we're at the top of the hour here. Real quick, if anybody is interested in participating in one of those scans, we are always happy to work with people. So if you wanted to do that, if we feel like we've provided you with enough information today, or maybe you need a little bit more information, maybe you've already done it. We encourage people to come back and do those scans again, see if your system has changed, if all the effort that you've made has in fact made some improvements in those settings.
It's
All
always
right.
just nice to see those numbers change year over year too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right. I'm going to close that poll there. If you didn't have time to respond, we'll be reaching out to you. We appreciate the feedback on that. If there are, in fact, areas where we can assist with that, we've got our expert services with Amy's team, where they'll be able to provide you with managed security services, remediation, architecture, pen testing, risk assessment, anything on the system that you need assistance with. They do this every day. You do it once a year or maybe once a decade. Let them help you, right?
Yeah, I mean, relearning it every time just takes too long. Let us help
Absolutely.
you get to the shortcuts.
Absolutely. And of course, got our best of breed security solutions, runs the full gamut of uh, security tools there. We're happy to discuss any of those with you, provide you additional information on it to get you to that place where that will help as well. All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Don't have time for questions. There was one question there. I will reach out to you directly, sir, and answer that for you. We really do appreciate your time today and looking at what we found last year, what we find interesting. Hopefully you found it valuable as well. And hopefully you are ready to take that next step and get started on that security journey. Amy, thank you for your valuable insight. I really appreciate your participating with me this year.
This is great. Thanks, Sandy, for having me.
Yep. All right. All right. Thanks, everybody, and take care and hope to talk to you soon.